Hi, Liberators. This is Tiffany Coleman with yet another episode of Interesting People. I have a very special guest on the show today. He has actually been on the show before. He was one of the panelists on the discussion about COVID and clergy. But he is back today to talk about a very interesting topic. Just to give you a little bit about Reverend Rob Tolson. He's a chaplain with Nova Healthcare Systems and Capital Caring Health and Hospice. He is licensed in radio. He's licensed in radio, and he has a podcast that comes on every Sunday called Man on Fire. I'd like to reintroduce to some and present to others, Reverend Rob Tolson. Yay! Thank you for being on the show again.
Yes. Well, I thank you for having me. I'm so excited. Definitely glad to be able to support a classmate and a friend. So definitely truly excited to be here with you and with everyone on today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes, that is another fun fact about you. He and I went to seminary together. Fun fact, grad school.
There you
Um,
go.
and you came out a year before I did, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I guess, yeah, I did come out 1 year before you, although we did have some classes together while
We
you were on
did. We
the Christian
did.
ed side of things and such. So,
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. So, yeah, so today, it's going to be a different type of conversation, but, Rob works in hospice care, and I thought it'd be really appropriate, for lack of a better term, to talk about death and dying as we are in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so it's interesting because death just kind of feels like it's all around sometimes. And I wanted to talk to somebody who works closely with this. And just kind of want to start off with a simple question right out the gate. What is the clinical definition of death or dying? What does that mean? What's the definition of it?
when we look at things from a standpoint of when you look at the end of life, at least from a clinical standpoint, you're looking at an absence of a heartbeat. You're looking at the absence of any kind of respirations. If they are hooked up to anything, you also kind of look for brain waves and brainwave activity. Although you still have cells that I guess are technically alive and other things as the body decomposes and certain things are even born, we're still, even in dying, still somewhat living. But those are the things that make us clinically dead. And that would be the standpoint that the medical folks look at. And I think out the gate as well, in terms of what I do, to kind of tie in with that, people assume that I'm the one that comes in to say that your loved one is dead. And it is a clinical person that does that. A
Mm-hmm.
doctor is the one on the front end that says that you have life, basically, to let you know that this is a girl or a boy and, it's healthy, everything else like that. The physician or the nurse does that. So I just want to even clarify out the gate that I'm not the one, even though I kind of know and hover around it. I'm not the one that's going to tell you that your loved one is gone on to glory. So
Okay.
that's something that, while I understand and know the clinical definition, there are other people that have to certify that life is ended.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So you're a chaplain in that regard. So
Yes.
okay. Okay.
Right. So I sit with the healthcare team and I'm a part of it because, again, I'm glad with healthcare that we just don't look at treating symptoms, but we realize that we're dealing with a whole person. So we're dealing with
Mm-hmm.
the person from not only a physical, but you're dealing with them from a psychosocial standpoint and spiritual. So in those other legs that make up, who we are as people, we need to understand, what are your family dynamics? What is your living situation like? At least with the family dynamics is kind of where the chaplain and social worker may kind of cross paths. But then the parts that may kind of lend itself to the emotional and spiritual support, um, definitely are something that are nuanced towards chaplains and being able to really sit to understand those dynamics as things are kind of going on and really journeying with people.
Gotcha, gotcha. And it was because even before we started recording, you were telling me some interesting things about the role that you have in there, that a chaplain is not just the one who's comes in and prays with the person and all of that stuff, read them their rights or what have you, but there's a more intricate I mean, administrative part that you have. Like it's your job to know the history of this person, to know what are some of the other things and the aspects that you're involved with when you say
Um,
that you're the chaplain.
I think from a nuanced perspective of what people may assume, as we talked about a little bit earlier, people assume that I go in and go pray and read scripture all day.
Right.
I'll be honest that probably about maybe 20-25% of my visits may encompass that, depending on where people are with their faith.
Mm-hmm.
Is something that we learned in school. One of the things that I think about from one of our professors, that God is a big boy. He can handle certain things. To be able to give people the breath to be able to be mad at God or other things, I don't really go
Mm-hmm.
in to go push anything on people. And a lot of times that is also an assumption.
Mm-hmm.
My role is really to be there and be present. And I think with that, with presence, a lot of other things are able to flow out of it. From the
Mm,
administrative side, as you asked about it, I've also been trained now to look at things like pain behaviors, things that also would indicate when a person is declining. If I do have, like, let's say, a prayer experience with somebody or something, and I may use something that is very common, like the Lord's Prayer or the 23rd Psalm, and then I notice that they're having problems reciting it or other things, or they're doing more labored breathing. As we meet as an interdisciplinary team with a doctor, nurse, social worker, myself, and other people that may be kind of sitting around the table, my lens of seeing some of those changes as well say, hey, we may need to consider that this person is starting to decline, and this is the
mm,
reason that I'm seeing that. Um, and those are things that are valued from my team members, that they look at to say, okay, because I have the time to sit with them, I'm not in and out of the rooms, that I kind of may notice some things a little bit differently. And also the way I hear certain things that may be able to feed back into why there is resistance, for instance, in treating. There may be an issue of drug use in the family or a fear of
mm,
death with things like morphine, let's say. So to be able to bring that back up and saying, well, in our conversation, because of a pattern of drug use in the family, people are scared to take these medicines that you're suggesting. Those type of things help the team then to understand, and then make
yeah.
a great care plan to be able to understand we're not just trying to treat the symptoms or trying to push even in the midst of sometimes a crisis situation, but we really
Mm-hmm.
need to look at how do we move things forward. And that's the privilege that I have of sitting at the table and really being able to kind of be the bridge between my patients and families and our medical team.
That's so interesting. I think it's important too to note that you help to bring about a holistic approach to
Hmm.
the person's care.
Right.
Even if it is end of life care, there is still care that has to happen.
Right. And I think that to also understand where people may think when they hear certain words like hospice, which they think means that people have given up, but there are times that we have a point that we really can't recover to go back to what we consider our normal baseline or who or what we were before. And I think with that as well, to preserve one's dignity, to be able to look at how we have changed the care plan. It's not that we ever stop caring for a patient, but
Mm-hmm.
how we care. Will it be as aggressive as it was before?
Mm-hmm.
Will that aggression lead to more harm than good? Those are things that we also have to consider. And unfortunately, because a lot of people do not want to have a conversation about death and dying, we may end up in places where statistics kind of lend themselves to say that we have more people dying in the hospital. I think it was around 75 or 80% of people that die in there that don't want to. They want to be at home or they
Mm.
want to be around loved ones or other things, but they're in that clinical environment versus being in a comfortable environment and surrounded by loved ones to make it happen. But simply because sometimes we don't have those conversations, we don't know how people want to be cared, especially as they approach end of life.
Mm. 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 Yeah, it's interesting because I just actually, in my mind, just went back to the room where my grandmother passed away. And I just remember that she was in a clinical environment and we were, around her. This is a subject that's really hard for me to talk about. And so, hearing you say something like, dignity, dying with dignity, and, also, you said something that struck me, talking about, how a person can, um, how they want to have, have people around them that they love. And then also talking about the life-giving treatments that will cause more harm than good. To some people think that death is the ultimate, but do you see death as harmful, or do you see, how do we differentiate between more damage and somebody just kind of coasting out of here without that? Is death harmful, or is it?
I won't say death is harmful, but the ways that we may approach that point sometimes can be.
Mm,
If it is a way that we, let's say, and let's deal with things as we talk about from a seminary perspective, and we're looking at real life. If things had gone different for Brother Blake, um, it's not the ideal way to die. Being shot
mm,
up by police multiple times, everything else.
mm-hmm,
But and in the work that I've done, especially when I was doing more traumas, unfortunately, people that I may have encountered may have had some kind of traumatic event, whether it was a heart attack or a stroke or a car accident, gunshots, whatever else. And looking at that, where you don't necessarily have that kind of time, and then we still may leave people hooked up to machines. And, there are times that, for instance, I understand that people are not ready to let go of their loved ones, especially um, dealing with younger folks. And it's hard to watch gun violence with younger folks and
mm,
the things that may happen, like a gunshot to the head, and you have, unfortunately, just being graphic about it, but you have brain oozing out and a piece of skull missing.
mm,
And, telling people sometimes, if anybody can do it, it's God. Our medical staff just don't have the know-how to be able to know how to stop brain from oozing out, or once it's shifted, to be able to put it back so that it can kind of function again if it's shifted inside of the
mm-hmm,
cranium. But if there's anybody that can do it, it's God. But there are also times that people, if we look at people like Kubler-Ross that go through and talk about stages of grief, and one of them being bargaining, the funny thing is, where I think that death kind of goes wrong from the way I see it, is we think God needs more time to be able to do what God wants to do.
mm,
God doesn't need our time to be able to do that. And sometimes if we removed certain machines that may be helping to sustain things that your body should be doing it on its own. And I think those are conversations that we don't always have.
mm.
And to be able to talk with our medical folks, that we need to do a better job when people's medical education may have been MASH, Trapper John MD, all these TV
Oh
shows,
God.
that I think about, that where you look at it, and a code, for instance, looks so sexy on TV, a couple of rubs of the paddle, everything else, and then, shock, and they're up and talking after commercial break. Unfortunately, those are the things that aren't the way they really go. And when we don't want to let go of people based off of certain things, and a lot of times it's about us, and then being able to come to the reality of the situation, especially when it's been grave, i.e.,
Mm,
the gunshots, and you know that you have a piece of skull missing and other things.
mm,
It's then difficult to then say we can do something to save this, or a tragic car accident, or people that have been electrocuted. I'm just thinking of the different things that I've seen, but it's hard for a family to go in and then say, hey, let's take the tube out to stop them from being assisted to breathe. But it's also, in terms of that as well, people don't understand, for our medical team, where again, I also hold intention trying to help hold them up. It's been very difficult, and I think about the nurses, especially, that I've had the privilege of working with, and I've had the greats of being able to work with some great people. But it's been hard to watch nurses on cardiac and people that are hooked up to a machine that is totally pumping blood for them,
mm,
and they decide that, what, enough of this, and they know when they hit that switch for that, and that person that is up and able to talk, but they have what is called an LVAD, that is basically an artificial machine doing the work of the heart, because their heart is not functioning anymore. And to say enough of this, and when you turn that off, within a few minutes that person is gone. That's
mm.
difficult for somebody to live with on the other end, where you think it's just their job. That patient for them can remind them of a loved one, and it is difficult for them to deal with that as well. So there's trauma on both sides, in terms of the family as well as the caregiver, and then to look at sometimes how aggressive people may want to be. It may not have the death be as graceful or as peaceful as it could be if things were allowed to happen and
Wow.
unfold naturally.
Wow. And I think that's one thing we don't think about is nurses and the people who do this stuff, like how difficult it is for them. It's not easy being a nurse or being somebody who does administer the care like that.
I would say the longer that you hang around the bed, the more difficult it is to say goodbye. And people may not understand that or think that, nurses or doctors are so cold hearted. The physicians you may not have as much interaction with, but for that nurse, if you're in the hospital setting that has worked 3 consecutive shifts of 12 hours with you and maybe another one of 4 or 8 hours to get to their 40 hours or so a week, a lot of them work 4 on and 3 off. Um, they've spent a good amount of time with you.
Wow.
They don't even spend as much time with their family as they've spent with you. If you think if they're doing
Mm,
12 on and they're 12 off, part of that is sleeping. And if they have children, it's a minimal interaction because you have to kind of go in, take a shower, get up, drive in. So you got to shave off that time that you have of rest. So they've spent 12 hours caring for you. That's a lot over
wow.
consecutive time. Or if you're in the home setting, you're dealing with hospice. If it's not a quick death and you've spent the expectation with hospice, so people can understand, is that you live 6 months or less, but 6 months or less. But when you have lived a year, 2 years on hospice, and you've gotten to know that family, you've walked into that home every week or every 2 weeks by Medicaid guidelines that you have to see your patient every 14 days, more so if things are becoming worse. You've gotten to know those people and know them pretty
Mm,
well, and in a very intimate setting. You've been in their homes, and then if they don't have the hospital bed set up in the living room or somewhere and you're in their bedroom, you're in the most intimate of settings, and you can't
mm,
tell me that that does not rub off on you. In terms
mm,
of, it's not just a patient at that point. You know the personhood of that person. If you provided care to wipe their rear end or other stuff, it is so intimate that people don't understand that we're an ally sometimes in this. And it's not just that we're trying to push you to do whatever, because as you said, I've been in situations. My very first solo call when I got into this, and I didn't have the pleasure of knowing my father. My father died 2 weeks after my second birthday. So
mm,
I think about the fact, and I know that he died from emphysema and smoking. The first person that I saw when I was working in the hospital ended up having to be extubated. And he had emphysema, and the bottom of his lungs
mm,
had rotted out. And all I could see in that
mm,
bed was my father.
mm,
That's who I saw while I was dealing with that family. And if I think about it from a now in perspective of wounded healer, I could so connect to the distress of a daughter and son having to make the decision on their father and removing that and understanding how gravely ill he was. But with
mm,
that, to understand that, and I can never forget that phone call from that first night of sitting around in that kind of intense environment and calling my mom, sobbing, who has been my personal pastor and helping to patch me back together again, that these cases still touch me. And I think about
mhm.
those things and then where families are and where they struggle. And please know it's a struggle for us as we sit around a different table having the conversation and trying to say, hey, how do we care for Mr. Tolson, or how do we care for one of his family members? Because we do see the humanity, especially when families show up and do all this love, that we understand how difficult it is to deal with the fact that they may not be here much longer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's heavy. That gives you a lot to think about. A lot
Mm-hmm.
to think about. And it's more than just the patient that's going through this. It's an entire family going through something.
Mm-hmm.
When you're dealing with this.
It's
Yeah,
the bed
that's
and the people around the bed. And sometimes it's, as I would say, maybe my job sometimes, if the bed is not responsive, to reclaim the voice of the patient or the person that's in the bed to say, what would they say if they were here? Would
mhm.
they want to be here and they had no awareness of their self, or had to clean them every day, or they have to sit with a trach hole in their throat or a feeding tube in because they can't really eat anymore. And those
Mm,
are things that, again, to have those discussions, it is pretty heavy, but to carry all of that intention to then say, sometimes our stuff that gets in the way, because I may have wished that I was a better son or, a better sibling or whatever, that may have me say, hey, let's go balls to the wall, do everything you can. but everything that I can may say that they are, again, the things that I described in the beginning, that they have a heartbeat, they have respirations with or without a machine. But then what makes you Tiffany? What makes me Robert? Are those things there anymore? Can I hear your voice
Mm-hmm.
anymore? Knowing that Tiffany can sing, will I ever hear you sing again? And if the
Mm-hmm.
prognosis is no, and you're sitting there drooling or you're in a diaper and other things, is that the way you really want to live? And those are
Mm.
things that, if we cannot make it about us and make it about them and really ask that question and wrestle with it, while it's hard to say goodbye, some people are clear, and yet we don't always go with their wishes of understanding. They don't want to live like that or don't consider
Yeah.
that to be living. And it's a hard decision to have to make. But that's
Yes.
part of where I'm there to also kind of help hold someone's hand to get through that very tough
Yes.
moment.
Yes. And that to me helps me quite a bit because it's all about the when we say quality of life, are they able to be who they are? Are they able that's important for people to think about, for me to think about.
Hmm.
Because we do want to hold on to the person, but if we do hold on to them, are they won't be the person that we know and that we love. Um yeah, yeah, that's heavy. That's heavy. That really is. That really is.
It is. And we still have, as I tell people as well, we have work to do because sometimes, because it's difficult on the medical side, and, I kind of feel kind of bad because I feel like I'm on a tug rope that I'm tugging on both sides, that I got one foot with this family and one foot with the medical team.
Mhm.
But it is difficult in the fact that sometimes we offer so much, but yet I don't think we always give a full explanation. There have been a lot of times that I've seen families offered after a while, you can only leave a breathing tube in for so long before it has to come out. And we
Mhm.
offer families then the option of doing a trach, which is putting a hole in their throat and then having the
Mhm.
machine to kind of breathe in and out that way, which is less invasive, and you don't have as many things in, which can cause bacteria, germs, and lead to other very serious conditions. And normally we
Mhm.
do that in concert with a PEG, which is a PEG tube, which is to help feed them. You
Mhm.
do that, but what that then means when you offer that, and we don't tell families, it's like, well, sure, go ahead on and do that. But then that means that they're going to live with the feeding tube for the rest of their life, and they're going to live on a ventilator for the rest of their life.
Mm.
Um, very few people recover from that kind of
Mhm.
place, that then you have them, if you can find a nursing home, because there's not that many nursing homes or facilities that take people that
Yeah.
have a trach and peg. And you're doing that, and then understanding that if they're living a bedridden kind of life, they're going to have to constantly be turned, changed, everything else. And families then don't think about that. And then you leave your
Yeah.
loved one in a facility. And is that fair to them, especially if you're not going by every day to see them or other things? I think those are
Mm-mm.
also very serious considerations that we struggle because we don't want to give up on the medical side as well, and we keep offering all these things, and the families are like, sure, but then they don't understand sometimes the
What all of
implications of
that
their
means.
choices. And then you have a loved one that may be living another 10 or 15 years, but they're living a bedridden existence with bed sores, other things like that, that to be considered, is that the way they would have wanted to live before they died? So that's where I talk about quality of living
Yeah.
and then quality of dying. And to just get a call that your loved one has died, and you're not seeing them every day, you're going every day at first, that may turn down to, every other day, to then being maybe once a week
Once
or
a week.
once a month, whatever else. And then mama, daddy, whoever else, even sometimes kids end up dying by themselves. And families
Mm.
have, to a degree, not been as vigilant as when the traumatic thing first happened and they made this
Yeah.
decision, but then understanding the long road that, was ahead and what they signed them up for. And I
Yeah.
know, as for me, that's where an advance directive and other things are so important and crucial, that I have in place, at least to be able to say and encourage families to do that, and not have that, oh, we don't talk about death. Well, baby, if Jesus could do it and say, hey, I won't be here with you much longer for my faith filled community, we need to start talking about it. Because you can say, hey, I may not want to die on this cross today. If you got to do something else, I'll prefer to go this way. And we need to think
Mhm.
about that as we approach and we deal with death.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Um, it's, it's a lot to think about.
Hmm.
And it's a topic that we're all afraid of. But I think it's necessary to have these types of discussions. Um, One of the books that I've read, Dave Ramsey talks about having all of this stuff in place. And it's something that we don't want to talk about, but it's the responsible thing to do.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I don't want to go on a tangent on that because I just kind of want to stay kind of, I don't want to go off on that, but yes, but it is important to have all of those so that people know what your wishes are and know what it is that you desire.
Mm.
Yeah.
That is very important. And I think as much as you can communicate that, that would be the fair thing to do with your loved ones so that they don't feel the
Yeah.
weight of making a decision, but knowing that it's one that ultimately you have made. And honestly, sometimes in the position that God is making or has made as well. And sometimes we need to get out of God's way. And that basically is the best way that I can sum that up so that way people understand.
Hmm.
We all have to go that way, but how we may go, if we can help craft it, and while we can do it in a better season, could help out somebody when it's not as easy to look at and then try to think, what should I do now?
Understood.
Hmm.
Understood. Um, so now you have shared with me before that you have been the one in the room with someone who is actually transitioning.
Hmm.
So for and being in that room, because I've been in that room a couple of times, it's terrifying for me. It is. But for somebody who does it, I don't want to say on the regular, but more frequently than I have, what is it like to be in that space with someone?
To me, it's an honor to be in that space, and I had the privilege of having a wonderful young lady, Melanie Bailey, who is now retired, but was a chaplain at Washington Adventist Hospital in Washington D.C. And I love Chaplain Bailey to death, literally. Um, and she started a program called NODA, which means No One Dies Alone, and that has so stuck with me and has been a part of my ministry that I have found peace in terms of being in that room. And while it is difficult sometimes to be on the other side, especially of a death pronouncement, definitely different images kind of going through my head of scenarios that I've been in. Um, it's great to be able to sit with somebody and hopefully create an environment of peace and affirming them on this side and affirming them of what may be on the other side for them. And to me, that's a
Mm-hmm.
very special place to be in. And there are times that I wouldn't say I'm the most creative person or other things, but there's so many different things that I've been invited into. I've had great folks that I've had the privilege of doing ministry with. Another STVU grad that I think about, Reverend Dr. Shante McClyment, um, who did a lot to teach me about memory making, and really looking at those opportunities that I have in the room. I've had couples that have been married 50, 60, 70 years, to be able to sometimes get another hospital bed in so that they can lay together one last time, has been an honor for me to do.
Mm,
I've had an immigrant person that was here whose family was over in Spain, no family here, and to be able
mm,
to play music and just hold his hand until he took his last breath and let him know, I don't know your story because we got him and he was unresponsive the whole time that we had him in the hospital, but to be able to hold his hand and just say, hey, you're not alone in this, and to be able to know that while he was making that transition, to hold him was something that was an honor. So there are times that spaces are able to be created that have been nothing but a blessing to be able to do certain things and to be able to foster an environment where we're able to then create a place where people can feel peace on this side, and that peace can also be transient to help them be able to get to the journey to the next life. And that has been the ultimate blessing for my ministry and what I've been able to do.
mm-hmm. That's heavy for me. But it does give it a tender a tender edge though, like to be able um to escort somebody out for, I mean, I've heard my mom talk about, she was at at my grandmother's bedside when she passed away,
Mm-hmm.
when she took her last breath, and she said that that was an honor for her to be able to do that. So I get that, I understand
Yeah.
that, not personally, but but I respect it so much. I do.
Well, when
I
you think
do.
about that story and that person's journey and the fact that, there's certain times that you or I have gotten a chance to be a part of holding sometimes a piece or a lot of their story, and being able to be there with them, it's been an honor to be able to try and create that space so that they can be at peace even when they're facing uncertainty. And that's been good, or allowing family to be able to maybe find healing and hope in the midst of things, broken situations
Mhm.
or places where people have been afraid of death. And for me, I've even used comedy, in terms of some of my times to be able to do certain things. And I've been able to encounter God in these moments, which is why I'm able to do what I do as well. So I mean, the stories that I've been able to look at and to see, um, God has done some amazing things and given me incredible moments to be able to be with people. And even
Mhm.
when they've been challenging, it's just been an honor to be able to somehow be a facilitator in that moment for whatever may have been needed. Whether it's been like I can say I love my people, especially. I just don't serve Black people. But there's
Mhm.
also a natural thing sometimes that we have our own kind of unwritten or unspoken cultural things that we do. And
Sure.
sometimes I feel like I'm able to be a little bit more comfortable sometimes with my people that
Mhm.
have a certain kind of reverence for the reverend clergy, whatever you may call us, minister, whoever the title may be, pastor,
Doc,
elder,
doc.
overseer, yeah, doc, all of that. But to look at, and I definitely could think about one young lady that was making her turn, and grandma was very real. And I walked in the room and I got, well, dang, you are fine. And I'm just turning like, well, you're not bad looking yourself. And the whole family could kind of laugh then at that moment. But also in terms of that and us talking trash back and forth and everything else like that,
Mhm.
to be able to invite a granddaughter that was struggling to say, come on over and come sit with your grandmother. And
Mm.
to look at that and get her out of that window. And then that family, within like 3 or 4 days, she died and kind of had what we would call that rally, that last couple of bursts of energy that they had. But to look
Yeah.
at it when they talked about it and they wrote a note to the healthcare system to say what those moments met with the big chaplain. And it was funny to then hear, but I'm thinking all the trash talking that we did in the time, and it was just like a family reunion and other thing. And well, man, when you coming back and stuff, but to get everybody around that bed and just getting comfortable like it was family reunion, and they could share jokes
Yeah.
and to lighten that mold from, okay, I walk in, I got this huge chaplain badge on, everything else. And like, okay, what's coming next? And I mean, she set the stage where she's like, well, damn, you fine. I'm like, well, you not bad looking either. What's good? And so to be able to do that, but then everybody from that laugh then to say, no, we're going to have fun with this. And this is serious, but she needs you right now in a different way. We're going to try to
Mhm.
break this down and doing these invitations. And then when people ask, it's not Bible that I quote, but I could think about a Eutychus in the window. And it's like,
Mm.
Eutychus, before you fall asleep, come on, let's get up out of this window. I notice you over there. Maybe some other people will let
Mhm.
you fall, but let's get up out that window so you don't fall. Let's come on over here.
Mhm.
And to look at that and to be able to do certain things, again, that's one of many stories that I have to say only God could put me in a moment like that, and where families think
Yeah.
I did so much and I'm like, all I did was go in and be me. And like I said, that was a moment that I didn't necessarily pray, but I did notice certain things and facilitate that. That's been my biggest gift and my biggest blessing to be able to be in those moments.
That's a beautiful story. That's absolutely beautiful. And talking about a subject like that, you wouldn't think that there would be a moment like that, or that something like that would be possible.
Hmm.
But that's absolutely amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I
And
think
I
the
believe you've even
invitation.
oh.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm sorry. The invitation, I feel like, again, because part of what I would do, as you asked a little bit earlier on the back end, is to do what is my theological assessment around there, because there is that piece of what do I look at theologically. And for me, I have to be
Mhm.
able to put out what are my biases, my disclaimers, or how do I do ministry to understand how do I approach these moments. And I look at what's been done and trying to discern of invitations to the table. And I think about those moments that Christ has given, even up until the Last Supper, of doing an invitation to be at the table, even knowing what his impending death would have meant. But there was an invitation to be at the table. Um, and to be able to
Mhm.
try and invite people to the table one last time, and just being able to say you can find healing, you can find hope, you can find forgiveness, so many different things. So I look at that to try and have it not be a table that you're trying to flip over, but one that you can be invited to and you
Mm.
can have a seat. And while this may be a bitter meal or a last meal, let's take advantage with the time that we have. So those are things that I try to do and base my ministry off of, that I
Mm.
have chance to do, is to invite everyone to have a seat at the table. And literally, as much as I try to sit down and be with people and be conversational and not stand over them to talk with them, I try to have that invitation
Mhm.
like all of us. Let's come and let's sit down. Let's not rush this moment. Let's be in this moment so that we can take advantage of it. Because if you have the privilege of knowing that someone is going to die probably in days, weeks, or months, I don't want the question to be, well, did I, why can't I get more time? I want you to be able to look at how faithful you were with the time that you did have. And I think as much as I can push that piece of the
Wow.
conversation, um, I think
Mhm.
that it helps to have families have peace even when there's a loss, so that they can have a better grief and be able to move on and not live in the moments of what if, but celebrate the moments of what was done.
That's beautiful. That is so beautiful. And with that, should we be afraid of death and dying?
And let me be honest, there were times when I first started with this. I would say I wasn't as comfortable with this, but I've gotten more comfortable, and I'm always still learning, and I'm getting more comfortable with.
Mhm.
And so I don't want people to think, oh, well, you've never been, no, 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 baby. I looked at some other chaplains when I started. I'm like, why are you rubbing their head and stuff? Like, I can't touch them. Mm-mm. But I now find myself being more comfortable of being in those moments, and then looking at the sacred things that I'm able to do in those moments and be around. That I think for everyone, as much as we can, um, to be around there, I think helps out so much more later on, that we really should not have
Mm.
a fear of watching someone else to go through. But I also think on the other end, yeah, it causes us all to wrestle with our mortality. Again, the
Yeah.
jokester part of me has me raise the questions of, okay, I've seen several thousand ways to die. Which one would I choose? And I have my least favorite, and I have
Mm.
the ones that I can say that, okay, Lord, if when you going to take me out of here, can it be this or this and not this? Ultimately, I think everyone wants to sign up for the I go to sleep, I don't know nothing, I don't have no pain, and I wake up in heaven and I see Jesus. That's number one, at least on my list. And I was
Exhibit A.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I would say the least favorite, of where your body is failing, but your mind is there. And that's so difficult, especially in the calling of communicating with one's mouth and being a herald or proclaimer of the gospel, or talking with people, to have ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, where your body is failing,
My
but your
God.
mind is still sharp. I'm like, Lord, that would be a locked in kind of hell, when I'm not able to communicate, and you get down to maybe blinking or some other stuff, but you can't do a lot for your own. I mean, as bad as we talked about beforehand, cancer and other things are, I think that probably is my least favorite way of, if the Lord had to ask me of what I would prefer to do, if it was up to me and I could sign up for one. I'd be like, yeah, I'm not signing up for Lou Gehrig's, but you can go ahead on and put me on the let me go to sleep plan. And seeing all of those things that I've seen, I know it's not up to me, but it, like I said, it does cause each and every one of us to wrestle with our own mortality. And I think that that's probably the biggest part of death. But maybe if we get living a little bit better, and maybe if we have a real relationship and not some of the rhetoric that we experience in church, and we can get to a real relationship in God,
Mm.
to be able to be in a place, and you talked about your grandmother, and that struck me as much as I'm sitting and I have a picture of my grandmother in front of me. She's in my wallet, on my phone, everything else, because that lady helped to co-parent and raise me. And I'll never forget one of her profound statements before she died. She said, it's okay and I'm ready to die. I just don't know if I'm worthy to meet Jesus. And that
Mm.
thing has
Mm.
so stuck with me. And I think that that's in the place that I am. I'm like, it's okay. It's well with my soul, whichever way the Lord may get ready to move in my life, to say that your purpose on earth is done.
Mhm.
But am I worthy to see my Savior face to face? And that's kind of where I
Mm.
look at things now, that if there's any fear that I have right now, it's the fear of my own worth. And if I've done everything, that no rock will cry out. There'll be nothing left undone, and I didn't leave it all out down here for God. But I think that those are things that we have to really wrestle with. And death sometimes does call into question if our faith had us just, shouting and doing a whole bunch of, if you will, buck dancing, as I think Dr. Boykin Sanders may call it, or some
Mhm.
other stuff. And we're up here maybe playing church and doing some things, but realizing that that's not the real relationship with the Holy One. And if we're not in real relationship, I think sometimes that's part of our struggles. And what I hear with people are, you know, that piece that's there. And that may be where there is the regret of, or the fear of dying, is looking at the work that may be undone, and the times or the
Wow.
things that may have been wasted. And I think as much as we can do better with that, it makes it a little bit easier to deal with the fact that we do have to die one day.
Mm. Mm. So in that same vein, then how should we live? Should we do
Mm.
all the things? I mean, how should we live?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think, I'm called into question about trying to live out my love, trying to live out a lot of different things, that there is no regret. And I think we should live an unregrettable life. I think for
Mm.
those that are believers, though, as well, we are called into a disciplined life. And I would also look at into the fact of how surface are we versus how deep are we, and how connected. Um, the trees that produce the most fruits normally have the deeper roots. And I want to be so
Mm.
rooted in God that, at least at this point, that there is no question for me. And I don't need a preacher or a pastor to try and preach me into heaven, knowing that my works can't do it. But I'm really hoping that I'm in a real relationship, that ultimately I can kind of lean back. And if I take the same posture of the cross and doing it like a trust game or a trust fall, as much as I hear people definitely preaching, for seven last words, hopefully I can put it all in his hands and trust him with it. And if I can do that, then I think in terms of my living, as much as I have a trusting relationship with God and I'm able to really be real about some things, I think that
Mm.
helps to be able to have a peace that will transcend death, transcend a lot of different things that may be going on, COVID-19, a lot of other stuff. If you can really do as the old saints would say, if peace attaineth like a river, if you can say it's well with your soul, I think it'll be a lot easier for folks to be able to let go of some things. But again, it's where we are with certain things as well with our living, that I think those pieces, and to deal with and to try and unearth those regrets or other things that my training has helped me to do on the counseling side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that I think will help us to not have such fear of those moments as well. But I think dealing with our mess down here is part of the issue of where we struggle in the approach to death and life eternal, is not necessarily cleaning up some of the things that we have that are kind of messy down here.
Mm. Mm. You said something that hit me really hard when you said living an unregrettable life.
Hmm.
Um, and then you also talked about honesty and authenticity. And then you also talked about playing church. And I think that's where, not to get preachy, but I think that's where our religion or faith becomes questionable, and why people um, have a negative response toward Christianity. Even because we're not authentic, we're not real about what we're feeling. We're not, we stick more to the rhetoric and to the law versus dealing with people in a real way, in an authentic way, in a loving way, in a way that allows for their humanity as well as ours. Yes, we're spiritual people, but we're also human too. We haven't done a good job of meshing those two things together, I don't think.
Yeah. And I will just say this as well. When you just said that and kind of summarizing what you heard and just kind of being able to expand on that a little bit more, I want people to
Sure.
understand while they may see the chaplain badge for myself, um, the office is known as pastoral care. We've taken classes in seminary that deal with pastoral care. And what
Right.
I see as problematic is a lot of times, and where I've had the privilege of, again, what I do, um, I've been people's pastor. And they have people that have
Mm-hmm.
come in to visit them from their church, or sometimes there's a broken relationship with the church. But I've had the privilege of
Right.
really being the real pastor. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, no shade to our brothers and sisters in ministry. And I worry if I do things in performance sometimes, do I pray in performance and not in expectation? Do I do this in terms of a response from them? But I look at the fact that, we got people that haven't seen families or don't really know the situation. Again, I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad, brother minister, you on the phone and kick the chaplain out, kick all these other people if they ain't gonna be in faith. Bro, you ain't
Mm-hmm.
here with half this head blown off. So it ain't that we don't have faith, but you would do better, man or woman of God, to kind of not just try to do this via phone. And I'm not talking about doing this during a pandemic. This is a story that
Yeah.
happened in like 2015, 2016. And it's like, okay,
Wow.
Slim, I got you on the phone and all that, and we don't know what we're talking about. And we triangulate medicine against the Bible and other things, not even using examples of medicine in the Bible with people. But
Right.
we do
Come
all of
on.
this stuff there, and
Come
we
on.
really don't offer people, I think, real instances of what really goes on. We got to stop
Mm-hmm.
getting Jesus up. I just talked about this the other day in our own Bible study in church, that Jesus wasn't on the cross. For me, I'm a son. I'm my mama's last living child. And I look at the fact that my one
Mm.
thing right now, as much as I'm trying to make sure my health is good so my mom doesn't have to bury me, but if I do, I have the same spirit. Just let my mama be good. But Jesus wasn't up there, hey,
Mm-hmm.
lady, let me give you a little wink. This ain't going to be that bad, even though I'm about to die, because I'm going to be back in a few days. We, as I use the example, have the little cheat codes that I used to get in video games so I could know how to get around when things were challenging, or the
Uh-huh.
little oh God, what was the little book I used the other day? The Cliff Notes. That's what it was. The Cliff Notes. And we are Cliff Note Christians.
Cliff
That's what
notes.
we are.
Mm-hmm.
That we have the cheat code, that we know that Jesus got up and stuff like that, and we so rush to get him up all
My
night
God.
Friday, all night Saturday, all night Sunday. We don't look at the suffering or the humanity of the other things that are there. And I think if we did better jobs of preaching and teaching, and if we as quote unquote believers and disciples did a better job of going to places, not to always go where they have the best choirs or it may be more entertaining, but there was more real depth from the pulpit that pushed people to wrestle and
Mm.
struggle with some things as well. I think they could
Mm-hmm.
maybe struggle with life, how to deal with life, and some of the other things. And as I say, and even in this season of COVID-19, I'm worried about religion being more of a drug and people coming to get their hit or their entertainment week in and week out. But they're not getting, again, that real relationship or real things to have them in places to really wrestle with God. You may come out with your hip displaced, but my God, to be able to know that even when your hip is displaced, you
Mm.
have had that done by God. your limp is an indication of your experience with God or some other things. I think
Mm-hmm.
we're scared because we don't want to get any dirt or any blood on us. We don't want to get down in the pit to deal with that. But I'm
Mm,
thankful for a place and times in my life that I've been in the crucible of trials, that it's
mm,
not just, a thing that, like I say, to see the stories now, to really think of, yeah, you know it and you run through the story because you know of it. But again, I think sometimes we're so outcome based, even when people are preaching to us or teaching us, well, we know the three Hebrew boys got out and they saw the Son of Man. But what kind of faith do you have to say, hey, man, even if you're going to kill me, O king, it's okay because I'm still going with God. If we
mm.
approach death like that, sometimes of knowing what the outcome really is and being able to do that, I think our trials that are ahead of us that are very real, not that we know
Yeah.
that we're going to come out of the fiery furnace, but if we have enough trust, again, Old or New Testament, to put it all in God's hands and have a deep relationship. I
Yes.
don't think that we preach or teach that enough to really look at the depth. We look at the outcome. We look at the signs and wonders, but we don't look at what it took for that person to really journey through or to
Mm.
deal with real loss or other things that are there. You deal with David and Bathsheba, but then do you want to deal with the fact that David lost a child and what that's like?
Come on.
Do we want to deal with things of David going into somebody else's wife and then having that man killed and what that does for us? There's so many things that we don't want to really deal with, that we're doing such surface and sugary stuff in the church.
Yes.
It
Yes.
makes it a challenge then to really have people that are, again, scared to come to deal with things in the hospital. And we
Mm-hmm.
don't even want to deal with their trauma of maybe things that they've experienced in the hospital, that, yeah, they lost a loved one there. So it's hard for them to go into other things. But to look at the fact, as much as we want to call the church a hospital, we got to also then mirror what goes on in the real hospital as well.
My
And those are
God.
some of the things that I've experienced that I'm glad I can marry in a solid theology that has been done through STVU, and then other things that my church and other things have done to be able to say that, hey, if nobody else has been real with you in this moment, let me do some real ministry with you. And
Mm-hmm.
shout out when you have to do that, even with one of our professors, which I will, of course, with HIPAA and other stuff. But when you got to do that with somebody you sat in class with and they losing a loved one, and then they go back to talk to Dean Kenny about what you done, it lets you know the weight of what you've done as well in terms of things. But hopefully, as well, I've been found faithful, and to get some praise from some people up to Dean John Kenny or Dr. John Kenny.
Mm-hmm.
For me, still my eternal dean. That says a lot, at least, of hopefully what I've tried to do and what I still endeavor to do every day in this ministry that God has given me called chaplaincy.
Mm-mm-mm. Oh my God. Rob, I'm just gonna go right here and say you need to write a book.
You sound like some of my other clergy
You
friends
really
where I need to
do.
put some of these experiences down. And I do think that I do need to capture
Oh
some
my
of the privileges that I've
gosh.
had, but also some of the tools that I would hope that people would look at and use, that before I close my eyes, that hopefully people will look at that. And again, the foundation of what I've done, again, and shout out to my grandmother, whose picture literally is on the other side of this room. And I didn't know, and I complained every Sunday so people can understand how I got to this point in some ways. My grandmother was devoted. She was a deaconess and stepped down from being a deaconess when she got a divorce. But she never, while she stepped down officially, dealing with some pressure, um, she never stopped being a deaconess. God knows she never did. And every Sunday after church, we went to go see sick and shut in people. And she would take like the
Mm.
pulpit flowers when they were getting ready to throw them out, and taking flowers by. And we would not only go to people's homes, but the hospitals. And, well, Robert, go in there and go take a flower. I'm like, we ain't even coming here to see them people. Why am I taking one in? And just thinking to myself as a kid, I can't wait to grow up so I ain't got to go every Sunday after church, and I can go home, go play my games, get out this little three-piece suit and other stuff, and sit up in these little people's houses with the plastic on the furniture and other stuff. They ain't got no air, they ain't got no heat, all this other stuff, or they smell like old people and everything, and then they want to kiss on me and all this. I can't
Mm.
wait to not do this.
And look who's
And
doing it.
look at what she did to train me, though, to then say in some ways, and what God did through her, that I naturally fell into something that I enjoy now, going to see sick people and old people and people who may not have family. I mean, my ministry has taken me to shelters,
Mm.
to people on the street that we provide health care for, and to literally wherever they call home, to be able to do a ministry with them. I am so blessed to be able to be with people wherever they are in those final moments. That again, if it were not for Arlene P. Williams and all that she did to put me, as we would say, in that drug religion where she drugged me everywhere, I would not be here where I am now. But I also realized that God used that vessel called Arlene P. to help prepare me to be able to do what I do now and to be so comfortable with it. So again, when you asked about comfort, I think I was prepared for this in expected and unexpected ways to be able to naturally do this. And that's
Mhm.
where my joy comes from, and the piece of this call that God has given me, because this isn't for everybody.
No.
And again, if we're honest, we know people in ministry that they want to preach. Some of them may want pastor, but they don't want to go see no sick people and no
Mm-mm.
old people. And the people that, when you feel like their value has been used up, unfortunately, you're not doing things to pour back into them because they can no longer physically or financially serve the church. They're still a person. They're still God's beloved. And that's where I have the privilege of getting a chance to know some of these people that also have some serious church hurt. But because they've gotten old, the church has forgotten about them. And I'm glad to be able to pastor them in some ways and shepherd them and say that no, in the sight of God, until you take your last breath, and even after that, you have value. You are beloved. And I have the privilege of being able to hear your story and be able to go with you and to do communion or do some of the other things that I've been able to do. And even where my expertise or my faith does not align with theirs, to be able to call in the imam for the Muslim, to be able to call in the Baha'i community for those, even for the Seventh Day Adventist or the Jehovah's Witnesses that may not want me in. I can say, hey, you may not want this Baptist and his guttural theology or something. Or quite honestly, again, all of this ties in as we try to do very real things. My skin color is a problem for some people. I have the
Mm.
right anatomy, but I got the wrong complexion for to do the
Mhm.
the things that they need. Well, let me call in the European person for you as well, so that way, if you and your God and your heaven is European, let me make sure that you still have what you need. So I have no
Mm.
problem doing that, and I can humbly do that and not be insulted. And I think some people may be shocked, like, oh shoot, y'all done made it up in here too. So they're gonna be
Mm.
surprised. But at the same point, we have to also realize where our limitations are, where the limitations are for people that we serve, and being able to honor that. And hopefully they have their way, their chosen path. For, you and I, the door is Jesus. But if they want to follow Buddha or Muhammad or whoever else, I just try to help them out in their path and their journey, and help us all to be able to kind of coexist peacefully down here. And hopefully they find
Yes.
peace to be able to go to the next piece of life.
This there are more questions I could ask, but this has just been such a worthwhile conversation for me. And this is, I just am amazed. I'm absolutely amazed at the work that you do and how you help people, how you see people, how you embody the spirit of God on the earth. And there are few people that I can honestly say that I have had the privilege of sharing space with um, that I feel honored to be in communion with. And you are
Sure.
for sure one of those people.
Bless
Absolutely
you.
one of those people.
Bless you. Thank you.
Um, because it's not easy. Life in general is not easy. And then so the end of life is not easy. But you have a way of making it feel like Mr. Rogers would say, it's mentionable, and anything mentionable is manageable.
Hmm.
And you help to bring that to life in a very real way.
Yeah.
To the point where I'm almost ready to cry. But I'm not going to. I'm not going to. I promise I won't. But it is this has just been a beautiful moment
Yeah.
for
Well,
me to
Tiff, I just tell you, even in the midst of doing what I do, and you had asked about earlier, and I think God has a purpose for everything we've been through, and I do thank God for the relationship that we've
Mhm.
had for these years as well. And always
Yeah.
hold you and your mom in very high regard as part of my journey through the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology. But I even also think now,
Mhm.
and even through my own brokenness and things that I had to go through while I was in seminary, and even on the other side of this, and even honestly partnering with one of my nurses who just recently had a miscarriage at about 7.5 or 8 months, and then trying to help her find purpose in this
Oh
pain.
God.
And while she does it, and serves
Mhm.
everyone through hospice, to be able to look at the fact of now starting a nonprofit trying to minister to other mothers that have gone through losses and things, and even be able to provide resources. It's great to be able to be kind of like that fly on the wall, or that person that sits back and then observes. And I think through humility, one of the things that I
Mm.
was taught in terms of chaplain training, and one of our outcomes, some of it is cultural humility, but other things that are there, I think with humility and not going in, where again, not to beat up on our brothers and sisters in the pastorate or in the church ministry, but there are
Right.
times to be able to ask and seek those questions, that to come in and say, hey, I don't know. What should we be praying for right now? So if you want the
Mhm.
miracle, let's pray for that so I can understand what you want to pray for in this moment. If you want God's
Mhm.
peace, if you can accept God's will, what are we praying for in this moment? But to be able to do that versus, oh, I got the scripture for this moment, I got the prayer that's going to get them all, that may not minister to the moment and what they need. But to be able to listen,
Mhm.
reflect back some of the things that you hear, and a lot of times to be able to get the compliment that, oh, you really heard me. And people want to be heard, people want to be
Yeah.
validated in some of those things that are there. And then to be able to kind of summarize all that, even in a prayer, to be able to say everything that we have conversed about has been, again, my honor to be able to sit with people and allow them hopefully to feel like they've been heard, they've been valued, they've been loved. And even in the midst of where we all may experience pain or brokenness, to be able to even have and to be able to repurpose it. Again, to quote Dean Kenny, God has taken us through everything for a reason. And I thank God, even through the brokenness, even through the pain, even with a grandmother that lived to be over 100, to have lost her, and what she still means to me, because she's not a was, she still is a is. And that's what I say for everyone, your loved
Mhm.
one, this is the house that we live in. What makes me Robert, what makes you Tiffany, what makes whoever listens to us you, is not this. It's not the hair, it's not all the other things that can change, but the essence of who we are and the soul and those type of things that will continue to live on. And again, taking it from the African proverb, as often as we call the name, they live. And I look at that and the lessons or the other things that we can experience and how people can live. We're so blessed as often as we can call people out and recall those stories. So keep calling grandma's name, because she's still having prayers answered that she prayed on your behalf. Those other people that have poured into
My
you, keep
God.
calling those names. They are
Mhm.
still the imprints in the things they've done, their hands, their handiwork, the sacrifices for some of our people that may not have been college educated or whatever, and was still able to provide and have a home of love and everything else, and the foundations that I think that we have from having a great family structure, even in this dysfunction. Those are the things that allow me to connect and be able to share very real moments with people. Like, I know I'm not the only one with addicts in the family or other stuff, but to make those real connections and break down past
Mhm.
the BS, that's where I say the honesty and the true ministry is. And that's why I say that is the purpose of what we're all called to. And I think if we could do that, what I quote unquote do is magic in the end of life spectrum, we could do and be a better church, a better ecclesia, the body of believers. But I think we have to get to some real moments as well, and very much ones that stop preaching sugar and start getting to substance.
Mhm. Boy, that seminary went through you, didn't it?
Well, they say don't pass through union, let union pass through you. So hopefully it did something or another there. Hopefully it did
Oh
something,
my
because
God.
boy, I
This.
tell you, I was struggling. Lord knows I was struggling from a lot of the personal stuff of going on. But my God, through all of my pain and through
Oh.
all of my loss, to be able to really say that, you know what, and I definitely will never forget that while I feel like I had lost everything, I still had God. And that was the only thing holding me up and still
Yeah.
holds me up. That with that,
Yes.
I appreciate, like I say, even though it's not easy, my God, what God has done, and even the moments to be able to use and giving me a deeper relationship with Him, which I think has propelled me into a deeper cause of wanting other people to really have a very real and authentic and not surface relationship. And I can end it here. If you really
Mm-hmm.
want to be with somebody or date or whatever, like I tell the young brothers, you ain't gonna get nowhere with a sister just having a drive-by relationship or calling her every now and then, doing a little maintenance calls. I said I used to do that. I used to have a little play in me too. But I said when you can get to that, at least seeing that woman a couple of times and other things like that, a week or whatever, I say that sister will break down and take you seriously if you're serious about her. But it can't just be like, baby, you one in a million or a lot of this other little Mac stuff that we do. And we treat God sometimes like
Mm-hmm.
that too. We want God to come in and fix everything and other stuff, and then we leave God back in the corner. But for me,
Mm.
every day now, I'm just trying to center my day, start my day, end my day, and constantly throughout my day have these moments that, like Dean talked about juggling. I'm trying to just juggle these balls up in the air and say, hey, I'm still juggling, Lord. I haven't dropped it yet. I feel like I can't manage it. But if you touch it when it's up in the air, when it comes down, I know it has your due on it. And I keep throwing it back up and
Yes.
trusting again. And that's for me. I
Yes.
just want all believers to really be able to be there and not play church, but for us to be the church and be able to be in real relationship with God.
Yes. Yes. And we're going to end it right there. I'm not
Mm.
saying anything else. I'm not adding anything to it. If people want to reach out to you, Rob, can they get in touch with you on
I
social media in any
sure
way?
can. I'm easy to be found. I tell people I'm even in the phone book here. So robmtolson@gmail.com is how you can email me. I think a lot of my stuff,
Okay.
you can tell which fraternity I'm in. It's either going to be Q Fall 95 or DCQ Fall 95. I'm on Facebook.
Gotcha.
I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm there, and be prepared because I got jokes. I always got jokes and other stuff. I kind of push the line a little bit on stuff, but
All the
yeah, and
time.
I do have a public page on Facebook, which I got to do a little bit better on. And you can go to robtolson.com to find me as well. So I'm not hard to find.
Absolutely.
Definitely, I'm
Okay.
even on there, and robtolson.com is my website, and you can definitely be a part of that. And Tiffany, I thank you for the opportunity. I thank God for what He's done to be able to use you in this way and to marry your piece of entertainment and other things that He has done with you, and being able to have ministry and media be able to be merged in such a way for you to be able to have a movement and cause a ripple effect. And I'm just so thankful for what you're doing and so proud to be able to have this moment with you. And don't count it
Absolutely.
robbery to be able to talk about something that I could talk about for hours that I love, which is dealing with disciples, the real in life, and approaching the
Mm-hmm.
real in death, and the real fact that we all have an afterlife. That we know that He's gonna prepare the place for us, and I just so hold on and so believe in that I know that
Absolutely.
death again for me is not fearful, because I know that on the other side I'm gonna see my grandmother. I'll get a chance to see
Mm-hmm.
my father again. I'll get a chance to see my sister who died last year, but ultimately I'll be able to see him face to face. And if
Yes.
I can hear him
Yes.
say, well done, good and faithful servant, it'll all be worth it. Everything down here will have been worth it to be able to have that
Mm-hmm.
experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And before we end it, also plug your show as well, Man on Fire.
Yeah, Man on Fire. You all can catch us there. Again, I appreciate the seminary trio and what STVU gave me. It gave me one brother in Kevin Graham. It gave me another in Paul Sims. And you can catch us all cutting up on Sunday evenings, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. You can catch us on Facebook as well as we're on Zoom if you ever want to call in. But we are on 8 to 10, 2 hours on Sunday evening. It's called Man on Fire featuring Pastor Paul Sims, again on Facebook. And if you hook up with me, I always try to post it on Sunday as well. So I appreciate it. Definitely, if you all want to come in, we do have conversation through a Christian lens and deal with very real things that are going on. And please know there's enough going on in this world, and in the White House here, that always try to bring in what's happening down the street from me, since I am in Washington, D.C. There's
My
enough
God.
going on that we get to talk about week in and week out in a 2-hour time segment.
Mm-mm-mm. And as always, you can be up to date on Liberated Media at www.liberated-media.com. We are on Facebook at Liberated Media and Consulting, and I will also be sure to post all the handles and stuff for Rob in the description box below. If you want to reach out to him, he's a wonderful guy. You can ask him questions and all kinds of stuff like that. He's great to talk to. But thank you so much again for being on the show today, Rob. It's been a privilege and an honor to talk to you and to learn more about what you do and just this conversation has been so fulfilling.
Bless you.
And I am grateful. I am grateful. Well, this is another episode of Interesting People. Thank you so much for being with us today. And all your dealings with people, deal in truth and understanding because it's really the truth that sets us free.